Welcome back to Hannity. Breaking news out of Washington. A bombshell admission by the IRS. The tax agency is officially apologizing for subjecting conservative groups to additional scrutiny during the 2012 election.
Jay Sekulow is an attorney and chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice. He represented groups targeted by the agency. They admit they did it because you forced them to admit they did it.
We applied for our tax status in 2010. We waited 18 months. They sent these letters that wanting a lot of information they weren't allowed to ask us.
Send us your Facebook pages, your Twitter pages. And I said, does that include personal pages? And they said everything. They wanted to know your personal relationships with politicians and political parties. And they made an insinuation like, look, it can be considered perjury if you omit things from the IRS, and that carries with it jail time. I'm a pregnant stay-at-home mother on one income. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not doing anything.
Lois Lerner oversees tax-exempt organizations for the IRS.
They used names like Tea Party or Patriots, and they selected cases simply because the application had those names in the title. That was wrong. The IRS would like to apologize for that.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate. Wait a minute! I didn't realize apologies were sufficient in IRS-related issues.
Tell us about the derivation of your organization's name, especially if you had liberty in there.
This is Chicago thug politics.
What the IRS did here is outrageous.
It's an evil agency, and I hope the American people will get up in arms about it.
If, in fact, IRS personnel engaged in the kind of practices that have been reported on and were intentionally targeting conservative groups, then that's outrageous.
This isn't speculation. They're admitting it.
If this just isn't a gathering of an enemies list, I don't know what is.
They've apologized for it, which, by the way, the apology is not accepted. The president needs to stop the if and get to the reality here that this was a complete misuse of the Office of the Internal Revenue Service.
Has a crime been committed here?
This is not getting discussed on the mainstream media. Not only are they wrong legally, but the fact that they would do this is outrageous. This is an overreaction and really nonsense. How would you react if this was your son or your daughter? It's the offense of knowing the truth. It's the offense of having an alternate worldview. Saying God bless you to someone is not a violation of the law. Has a crime been committed? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. And I don't think it's just the Internal Revenue Service, just the IRS. It's the IRS. It's the Department of Justice. It's the Federal Election Commission. The government, quite frankly, is out of control. And that's because, as powerful as the White House is, the President of the United States, it's not the most powerful branch of government. The judiciary, the Supreme Court, powerful, but not the most powerful. The Capitol, Congress, very powerful agency, represents the people, powerful, but not the most powerful. The most powerful branch of government has become the fourth branch of government, the bureaucracy. And the problem is, bureaucracies are not part of our constitutional process. Bureaucracies, quite frankly, are not a branch of government, but they become all-powerful. The IRS is a perfect example of this. More regulations, more rules passed by these governmental agencies than enacted by Congress. And who are these bureaucrats, these agents, responsible to? They weren't elected by us. They weren't put in office by us. They're accountable to no one. They're elected by no one. But they go after individual citizens. And that's why we're fighting back. We've got a brand new book out I've authored called Undemocratic. How the bureaucrats are stealing our freedoms and liberties and how we can take it back. A perfect example of this is the IRS and its ongoing battle with conservatives and Christian organizations. I want to take you inside Washington, D.C. to meet with some of our government leaders that are concerned, like I am, about the need, the necessity for reform and restoration to our constitutional republic. Our movie Tax Invasion dealt with this, and in fact, the theme of tax invasion is the first couple of chapters of our brand new book, Undemocratic. Let's go to Washington, D.C. When you first heard about the IRS targeting, what was your reaction?
It was almost disbelief. And then when I heard that some of these groups were being asked what books you read. I mean, what kind of country would we live in where the tax agency is asking people what kind of books they read? And really, I think it's done for intimidation factor. You know, there are many people in churches where the ministers are afraid to speak out because they've been threatened that their tax-exempt status will be taken away from them. Here, we're not threatening to take it away. We're just threatening never to give you tax-exempt status.
Herman, let me ask you this. You are someone firsthand who experienced the Tea Party movement. You were a huge and have been a huge success in front of the Tea Party. When you were running for president, you were one of the most popular candidates among the Tea Party groups. And at that very same time you were running, we now find out that the IRS was targeting these Tea Party organizations. Give me your reaction when you first heard about this and kind of an overview of how you view the Tea Party movement right now.
The reason that I was enthusiastic about the Tea Party is because the people, the voters, were finally mobilizing in order to hold Washington accountable. That's what the Tea Party is all about. Secondly, when I heard that the IRS was targeting the Tea Party groups and other conservative groups, I was appalled. Never did I expect for it to be so blatant as when they came after Tea Party and other conservative groups. So like you and many others, I was flabbergasted and also outraged over the fact that an agency that is supposed to be working for the people was really working against the people.
We're going to have more from our movie Tax Invasion in just a moment, but let me encourage you to do something. We've got a brand new book I've just authored called Undemocratic: How Bureaucrats Are Stealing Our Liberties and Our Freedoms and How We Can Take It Back. This book is just coming out, and what we're trying to do, which we did with our previous book, Rise of ISIS, we want to get national attention on this topic of how our government is out of control and how we as the American people can restore our constitutional republic. And that's the reason I wrote Undemocratic. But here's what we need you to do. It's a challenge. We want to make sure this book reaches the New York Times bestsellers list, just like Rise of ISIS. And the reason is, once you do that, the leaders here in the United States, in media, have to take notice. We want to deliver a copy of this book to every member of the United States Congress, to every member of the Senate, to every governor from all 50 states. And this is where you come in. I want to encourage you to go to either Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy books. You can get the ebook version or the hardback version, but I need you to buy it now. And here's the reason why. We think time is of the essence. We're entering into political seasons. This is beyond politics. This is, whatever your political party, this book addresses a fundamental problem with all of this. And that is, we have an unelected bureaucracy running our government. And that's not what the founders envisioned. Let me encourage you to purchase a copy of Undemocratic. There's a couple ways you can do it. Wherever your books are sold, wherever you buy books, you can go there. You can also go to a special website we've set up, undemocraticbook.com. You could order it there, or simply go wherever your books are sold. Let your friends know too. We want to see change. We have a plan of action, not only pointing out what the problem is, but also how to solve it.
Americans' freedom under attack by the biggest and most dangerous branch of government, the federal bureaucracy. In his new book, Undemocratic: How Unelected, Unaccountable Bureaucrats Are Stealing Your Liberty and Freedom, ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow sounds the alarm. It's a powerful look at what's become the fourth branch of government. It's not in the Constitution, but the federal bureaucracy has become an out-of-control, unelected monstrosity that robs Americans of their rights through endless rules and regulations. In Undemocratic, Jay Sekulow, a New York Times bestselling author, provides a plan to fight back and explains why personal freedoms don't have to become a thing of the past. This must-read will be available in bookstores nationwide on May 19th. Order your copy today online at undemocraticbook.com. That's undemocraticbook, all one word, .com. It's time to put an end to the systematic abuse of the federal government.
Who's going to be running the government? Well, the Constitution's clear. It's we the people. But the way the government's operating right now, we've got a fourth branch of government that is stronger than any of them. Stronger than the presidency, stronger than the Supreme Court of the United States, stronger than the Congress. And it's the bureaucrats. Constitution doesn't allow for bureaucratic control of government, so we have to resist government when it's wrong, reform government from the inside, and then we have to restore our constitutional republic. In our book, Undemocratic, we not only talk about the issues and the problems, we provide concrete answers. So I want to encourage you, as we work to get this book on the New York Times bestsellers list, it's very important. Order the book today so your voice is heard and you've got an educated and informed opinion on how we take our government back. This book was written for you, so you know what the problems are and we have concrete solutions to fix them. It's undemocratic. We want to get it on the New York Times bestsellers list. We want to get national attention to this, and you can help.
Order your copy today online at undemocraticbook.com. That's undemocraticbook, all one word, .com. It's time to put an end to the systematic abuse of the federal government. From #1 New York Times bestselling author Jay Sekulow comes this must-read book about saving the democracy we love before it's too late. Order Undemocratic today.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everybody. Phony scandals is what members of the media, the White House, the president called the IRS scandal. Well, let me tell you, as a lawyer that's handling these cases, it's not a phony scandal. It was unconscionable and is unconscionable what a division of the government has done. Again, that's the reason I wrote the book, Undemocratic, but it's also the reason we've decided to go to court. We're not just writing about it, we're not just talking about it. We're in court litigating it. And by the way, a lot of our clients that were denied tax exemption, when we filed those lawsuits, guess what? They got their tax exempt status. But this is a government that calls these unbelievable scandals phony. Take a listen.
I have ordered an investigation to be begun. The FBI is coordinating with the Justice Department to see if any laws were broken in connection with those matters related to the IRS. Those were, I think, as everyone can agree, if not criminal, they were certainly outrageous and unacceptable, but we are examining the facts to see if there were criminal violations.
What are some possible criminal laws that could have been violated if, in fact, individuals or organizations were targeted for their conservative views?
Well, I think it was Congressman Scott, I think, really put his finger on it. There are potential civil rights.
Right. But do you know of any criminal laws that might have been violated? This is
I'm talking about criminal cases.
Okay.
Criminal violations. In the civil rights statutes, IRS, that I think we find there. There's also the possibility of 1,001 false statements, violations that might have been made given, given at least what I know at this point.
I believe there's been a pattern by this administration in not taking responsibility for failures, avoiding blame, pointing the fingers in somebody else's direction. Would you agree with that?
No.
First of all, your reaction when you first got word. The president said he was outraged. Of course, now he's calling it a phony scandal. But what was your reaction when you first heard about the IRS targeting, which they acknowledged?
It is a gross abuse of power. When Richard Nixon tried to use the IRS to target his political enemies, it was wrong, and it was rightfully decried in a bipartisan manner. And when the Obama administration did the same thing, it's every bit as wrong. And at the time, the president loudly went out and denounced it.
Right.
And then a few months go by and he says it's a phony scandal, move on. We need to get to the bottom of these facts. What we know already is deeply troubling.
So far, for most of this year, we've seen an endless parade of distractions and political posturing and phony scandals. And
can you tell us what phony scandals he's talking about?
Whether it's about the attacks in Benghazi and the talking points, or revelations about conduct at the IRS. A lot more energy and focus was paid by some in Congress as well as in the media on issues that, while important, are not of the highest priority to the American people, and they were not scandals.
The president came out when the scandal first was really hit the media with the Inspector General. They tried to get ahead of the Inspector General report. And he said he was outraged. It was horrible what happened. He then instructed his Attorney General, Eric Holder, to take direct action. Eric Holder was the one who inserted that this may in fact be criminal. Yet I represent 41 of the groups that were targeted. And some of the
small ones and large ones. No one's been contacted by the FBI. There's been no investigations done. Do you think these were political statements that the White House was trying to do? We now know, of course, it's going much higher up the internally than we initially thought. But what's your sense of the reaction?
It's like so many other responses from President Obama. He says the right thing, and you want to believe him. After Benghazi, he said he was going to fire the people who were responsible, but no one's been fired.
I directed Secretary Lew to follow up on the IG audit to see how this happened and who was responsible and to make sure that we understand all the facts.
On May 15th, the president directed you to investigate the IRS scandal. So if this is supposedly behind us, it's been more than 2 months since he directed you to lead the investigation. Explain to me how it was that conservative groups were targeted by the IRS.
Well, look, first of all, Chris, what we found out as we went through to find the facts is that there was equal opportunity bad judgment. It was conservative groups, it was progressive groups.
At equal numbers or not grossly disproportionate conservative groups over
there
progressive?
There are an equal number of groups. The bad judgment was equal opportunity.
But not the number of groups. No. It was like, I think over 100 as compared to maybe a dozen. Because an IRS official, Carter Hull, told Congress this week that he was ordered to send applications from 2 Tea Party groups for tax-exempt status to send them to the IRS Chief Counsel's office. That's William Wilkins, who's a political appointee. As a political appointee, he reports to you, to your office. Have you asked William Wilkins, the IRS Chief Counsel appointed by President Obama, what involvement he or his office had in all of this?
No, Chris, to be clear, there are 1,600 lawyers in the Chief Counsel's office, and there was no suggestion that this went to the one political person in that office. There's no evidence of it. There has been no evidence of it.
Well, wait a minute. Have you asked him?
Chris, I'm leaving the investigation to the proper people who do investigations. I don't think it's appropriate for me to do the investigation.
Has somebody in the Treasury Department asked William Wilkins what he knew about this?
Chris, there is no evidence that this went to any political official.
We're going to be back with more in just a moment, but again, our book, Undemocratic, brand new, just coming out. I want to encourage you to buy it. Our goal here, as I said, I want to get it to every member of Congress. We're going to get it to members of the Senate, but you need to be educated. Your family needs to be educated. We're going to point out, and we do point out what's wrong with our government, but we also point out how we're going to fix it. So let me encourage you, wherever you buy books, get a copy of Undemocratic. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
Americans' freedom under attack by the biggest and most dangerous branch of government, the federal bureaucracy. In his new book, Undemocratic, How Unelected, Unaccountable Bureaucrats Are Stealing Your Liberty and Freedom, ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow sounds the alarm. It's a powerful look at what's become the fourth branch of government. It's not in the Constitution, but the federal bureaucracy has become an out-of-control, unelected monstrosity that robs Americans of their rights through endless rules and regulations. In Undemocratic, Jay Sekulow, a New York Times bestselling author, provides a plan to fight back and explains why personal freedoms don't have to become a thing of the past. This must-read will be available in bookstores nationwide on May 19th. Order your copy today online at undemocraticbook.com. That's undemocraticbook, all one word, .com. It's time to put an end to the systematic abuse of the federal government.
Who's going to be running the government? Well, the Constitution's clear. It's we the people. But the way the government's operating right now, we've got a fourth branch of government that is stronger than any of them. Stronger than the presidency, stronger than the Supreme Court of the United States, stronger than the Congress. And it's the bureaucrats. Constitution doesn't allow for bureaucratic control of government, so we have to resist government when it's wrong, reform government from the inside, and then we have to restore our constitutional republic. In our book, Undemocratic, we not only talk about the issues and the problems, we provide concrete answers. So I want to encourage you, as we work to get this book on the New York Times bestsellers list, it's very important. Order the book today so your voice is heard and you've got an educated and informed opinion on how we take our government back. This book was written for you, so you know what the problems are and we have concrete solutions to fix them. It's undemocratic. We want to get it on the New York Times bestsellers list. We want to get national attention to this, and you can help.
Order your copy today online at undemocraticbook.com. undemocraticbook.com. That's undemocraticbook, all one word, .com. It's time to put an end to the systematic abuse of the federal government. From #1 New York Times bestselling author Jay Sekulow comes this must-read book about saving the democracy we love before it's too late. Order Undemocratic today.
So you've got an IRS tax code. You've got the IRS chief counsel appointed by the president. Jack Lew is told, the Secretary of Treasury is told by the president, you investigate this, you don't leave any stone unturned, you find out who's responsible. Jack Lew's on TV, Chris Wallace, is asked the question by Chris Wallace, have you talked to the IRS chief counsel, what did he know and when did he know it? No, I haven't spoken to him, I'm not going to, that's not my job. Now the president just instructed him.
Right.
And we've got Carter Hull, a 48-year career IRS lawyer, pointing everything to Washington, pointing it right to the chief counsel's office. So what should happen next?
Well, Jay, if you look at Jack Lew's performance when he went on the Sunday shows, it was eerily reminiscent of Ambassador Susan Rice's performance after Benghazi.
Yep.
He was reading White House talking points.
Yep.
And just like Benghazi, we now know those talking points were false.
Yep.
They were knowingly false, and they were edited by the White House, and the White House was caught lying about their editing the talking points. Just so with the IRS, Jack Lew was sent out there to tell a story.
Right, a
and
script.
And when he said there hasn't been evidence of wrongdoing, you got 2 employees who pleaded the 5th.
Right.
I mean, it's a flat-out falsehood. And we know, by the way, there were multiple instances of senior political officials who were aware. We know right now that Tea Party applications were sent to the chief counsel's office. A senior political official, which Jack Lew, apparently following the ostrich strategy, plunges his head in the sand and says, I don't know.
Right.
But we also have heard reports that the general counsel of the Treasury, who is a political appointee, was notified of this before the last election.
Correct.
The deputy secretary of the Treasury, who was another Obama political appointee, knew about it before the last election. Apparently, so did the White House counsel and the White House chief of staff.
Well, Lois Lerner's lawyer is the former law partner of the White House chief counsel. I mean, this is not an accident. And the current chief counsel of the IRS, pro bono, represented Jeremiah Wright, President Obama's pastor.
Well, and the defense of all of this is President Obama didn't know.
Right.
You know,
plausible deniability. That's
well, and I want to ask you a question, Jay.
Yep.
You're one of the most experienced, successful, talented lawyers in the country. Let me ask you, if you were defending a company, if I were the CEO of a company, and my company were accused of negligence, of maintaining a negligent plant where someone was injured or even killed,
right,
and my general counsel and chief operating officer had been notified of our negligence,
right.
How effective do you think my defense would be as CEO if I said, I didn't know, they didn't tell me?
0. Your culpability is it's apparent authority. You're the president of the company. You're responsible, even if they didn't tell you. The fact that they didn't tell you tells you how incompetent your leadership was.
Well, and that's of course right. You're on constructive notice.
Right.
Once a senior political official is informed, whether it's the chief counsel of the IRS, the general counsel of the Treasury, the deputy secretary of the Treasury, the White House counsel, or the chief of staff, President Barack Obama is constructively on notice because one of 2 things happened. Either they told him or they kept him deliberately ignorant because they thought they were somehow protecting him from the scandal. But what we do know is they were notified about it before the last election, and they made the political decision, gosh, we're not going to let anyone know. And it may have just occurred to them that discovering that the IRS was targeting Barack Obama's political opponents before the election might have had some negative electoral consequences.
During the course of this story, as it began to unfold, I knew immediately, as I'm sure you did, that it was impossible that it was 2 low-level, they made it very clear it was low-level staffers who were rogue who had made this independent decision.
No one thinks that your government ought to be able to target you for your religious or your political beliefs.
There are more words in the IRS code than there are in the Bible.
Right.
The complexity of it, every year Americans spend about $500 billion
trying to comply
on tax compliance.
Yep.
That's all wasted. That's dead weight loss. That's about the budget of our entire military.
Right.
As we like to say in Texas, that doesn't produce a single truck or tortilla.
Right.
It's just wasted.
Basically, what we're fighting for is the freedom of our nation. Are we going to have a nation that's for of and by the people, or a nation that is totally controlled by the government? We get to make that decision.
You saw and heard the question asked. Who's going to be running the government? Well, the Constitution's clear. It's we the people. But the way the government's operating right now, we've got a fourth branch of government that is stronger than any of them. Stronger than the presidency, stronger than the Supreme Court of the United States, stronger than the Congress. And it's the bureaucrats. Constitution doesn't allow for bureaucratic control of government, so we have to resist government when it's wrong, reform government from the inside so that the IRS and other agencies do not continue to get away with this, and then we have to restore our constitutional republic. In our book, Undemocratic, we not only talk about the issues and the problems, we provide concrete answers. So I want to encourage you, as we work to get this book on the New York Times bestsellers list, very important, order the book today so your voice is heard and you've got an educated and informed opinion on how we take our government back. This book was written for you, those of you watching this broadcast right now, so you know what the problems are and we have concrete solutions to fix them. It's undemocratic. We want to get it on the New York Times bestsellers list. We want to get national attention to this, and you can help.
Americans' freedom under attack by the biggest and most dangerous branch of government, the federal bureaucracy. In his new book, Undemocratic, How Unelected, Unaccountable Bureaucrats Are Stealing Your Liberty and Freedom, ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow sounds the alarm. It's a powerful look at what's become the fourth branch of government. It's not in the Constitution, but the federal bureaucracy has become an out-of-control, unelected monstrosity that robs Americans of their rights through endless rules and regulations. In Undemocratic, Jay Sekulow, a New York Times bestselling author, provides a plan to fight back and explains why personal freedoms don't have to become a thing of the past. This must-read will be available in bookstores nationwide on May 19th. Order your copy today online at undemocraticbook.com. That's undemocraticbook, all one word, .com. It's time to put an end to the systematic abuse of the federal government.
Who's going to be running the government? Well, the Constitution's clear. It's we the people. But the way the government's operating right now, we've got a fourth branch of government that is stronger than any of them. Stronger than the presidency, stronger than the Supreme Court of the United States, stronger than the Congress. And it's the bureaucrats. Constitution doesn't allow for bureaucratic control of government, so we have to resist government when it's wrong, reform government from the inside, and then we have to restore our constitutional republic. In our book, Undemocratic, we not only talk about the issues and the problems, we provide concrete answers. So I want to encourage you, as we work to get this book on the New York Times bestsellers list, it's very important. Order the book today so your voice is heard and you've got an educated and informed opinion on how we take our government back. This book was written for you, so you know what the problems are and we have concrete solutions to fix them. It's undemocratic. We want to get it on the New York Times bestsellers list. We want to get national attention to this, and you can help.
Order your copy today online at undemocraticbook.com. That's undemocraticbook, all one word, .com. It's time to put an end to the systematic abuse of the federal government.